In this lecture, we're going to examine Earth's climates and major terrestrial biomes. Biomes are specific portions of the biosphere that's determined by a climate, precipitation, temperature, and a predominant vegetation and organisms that have evolved to live in this particular environment. There are three broad categories based on climate, and these are marine, freshwater, and terrestrial biomes. In this lecture, we're going to talk about the terrestrial biomes that are found on Earth. Biomes themselves, we can further divide them based on the ecosystems, the interactions between organisms, and their surrounding abiotic environment, so water, rain, sunlight. Much of the Earth's climatic variation is caused by the uneven heating of Earth's surface by the sun. And this uneven heating is a result of the Earth's spherical shape and also the angle that it rotates on its axis as it orbits the sun. The latitude north and south at which the sun is directly overhead changes with seasons. And this seasonal change occurs because the Earth's axis of rotation is not perpendicular to its plane, and it's actually tilted about 23.5 degrees away from the perpendicular. As a result of this tilt, on June 21st, the sun is directly overhead the Tropic of Cancer at 23.5 degrees north. On December 21st, it is directly over the Tropic of Capricorn at 23.5 degrees south. In September and March 21st, September 23rd, the sun is directly over the equator. And so because of this seasonal variation of where the sun is located, proximity to different points on Earth, you get these seasonal variations as you go north and south from the equator. The other major factor that controls the different biomes and climates on Earth is the Coriolis effect. We know that the Earth rotates on its axis, and because of this rotation, it causes this apparent deflection of winds and water to the right in the northern hemisphere, so they swerve towards the right if you're facing down towards the equator. And if you're coming in the southern hemisphere and going towards the equator, you would be swerving towards the left. And this causes the prevailing winds all over the globe, and we'll describe these in the next slide. These are the polar easterlies, the westerlies, and the trade winds. This heating of the Earth's surface by the sun is going to drive circulation through the atmosphere. So in March and September, when the sun is directly over the equator, or whether you're talking about June or December when it's directly over 23 degrees north or south latitude, most of the sun's energy is going to be focused in this area on the globe. And as a result, you're going to get these uneven heating patterns. At the equator, you're going to get a lot of the sun's energy at the surface. This air is going to heat up. As a result, it's going to rise and expand. As it rises, this air is going to cool. It's going to produce rain, and that's why you get quite a bit of rain here at the equator in what we call the ITCZ, or the Intertropic Convergence Zone. As this air is at the higher elevations, it's going to cool and it's going to spread towards the South Pole and towards the North Pole. As it spreads, it's going to become more dense and sink, and then at 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south, we have cold air coming down. Again, this is going to spread towards the poles here and towards the pole here. It's going to pick up energy from the sun, the Earth's surface. It's going to heat up, and you're going to get this convection or air rising at 60 degrees north, 60 degrees south, and then finally at the poles you're going to get this high pressure system as this cold air sinks at the South Pole and at the North Pole. And because of the Coriolis effect, you're going to get different wind patterns. You're going to get the trade winds that are blowing towards the equator. They're deflecting towards the right in the northern hemisphere. They deflect towards the left in the southern hemisphere, again because of the Coriolis effect. Then you're going to get these westerly patterns between 30 degrees north and 60 degrees north. You're also going to get these westerlies between 30 degrees south, 60 degrees south, and then finally the polar easterlies flowing between 60 and 90 degrees south and between 60 and 90 degrees north latitude. And so this diagram really shows what's going on when you have the uneven heat exchange and you have the Coriolis effect. You get a low pressure system at the equator because you have warm air rising, and so you have a low pressure system. Because of the Coriolis effect, it's going to cause this deflection in the counterclockwise rotation. At 30 degrees north, you're going to have cold air coming back down to the surface of Earth, so you're going to have a high pressure system. In the northern hemisphere, this rotates clockwise. At 60 degrees north, you're going to have a counterclockwise low pressure system, and that at 90 degrees north, you're going to have a clockwise high pressure system. And the opposite is true as we move into the southern hemisphere. High pressure systems in the southern hemisphere rotate in a counterclockwise direction, so you'll have a high pressure system at 30 degrees south and a high pressure system at 90 degrees south. You'll have a low pressure system of warm air rising up into the atmosphere at 60 degrees south. And then of course you're going to have the westerlies here, and the trade winds near flowing into the equator, and then the polar easterlies flowing out of the poles. And you'll notice that the wind patterns in the northern hemisphere, you're going to have a deflection of the wind towards the right in the northern hemisphere and a deflection of the winds towards the left in the southern hemisphere. And again, this is caused because of the Coriolis effect and the rotation of the Earth on its axis. If we look at the major surface currents around the globe, you can see again this is caused because of the Coriolis effect. In the northern hemisphere, you're going to have a clockwise gyre or clockwise rotation. And in the southern hemisphere, you're going to have a counterclockwise rotation at the surface of the oceans. So the oceans are very deep. So not only are we concerned with what's going on with the currents at the surface, but we have to remember that there's going to be circulation of this marine water throughout the water column. So you're going to have circulation at the surface. You're also going to have circulation deep at the bottom of the ocean. And that's what we see here. Here near the equator, we have this warm, less salty, shallow current. As it migrates towards the North Pole, it's going to cool and become more dense. It's going to sink. So this cold water is going to travel again down across the equator, down towards Antarctica. This is very deep current. It's going to continue to travel and then back up to the equator where it's going to warm up. As it warms up, it's going to rise. And again, you're going to get this ocean conveyor belt that exists on Earth. The other factor that's going to control climate is mountains, orographic effects. And that can be seen here in these diagrams. This is what you would see near Seattle, Washington, for example. You have the Pacific Ocean here. Here would be Seattle, Washington. And then here you have the Cascade Mountain Range. As the prevailing winds come off the Pacific towards Seattle, they're forced up the mountainside. As they're forced up, they become more dense. And this water that's in the atmosphere falls as precipitation. That air then can go over top of the mountains and you get this rain shadow effect on the other side. So you can see this near Seattle, Washington. You can also see this in the Himalayas and the Tibetan Plateau. As the warm, moist air comes to the Himalayas, it's forced to go over the mountains. As a result, all the precipitation is dropped on this side, and you can see it's very green. You have a lot of vegetation on this side, and then you have the rain shadow effect where you have deserts, very arid climates on this side, and this is caused because of the orographic precipitation. In this lecture, we're going to talk about the major biomes all over the globe, and this map really shows those biomes themselves. We're going to talk about tundra biomes, boreal forests, temperate forests, Mediterranean, tropical rainforests, savannas, and grassland biomes. This is a nice video here from PBS, and it really describes what past biomes may have looked like. In fact, it's about Arctic dinosaurs, and that may seem like a bit of a misnomer because we think of dinosaurs as these cold-blooded organisms that need to live in these tropical environments, but indeed past biomes were considerably different than they are today. And so this is a very good illustration of what these past biomes may have looked like on Earth. They also examine leaf fossils, and they try to use these and really show how leaves and other fossils can be used to recreate past biomes that may have existed 100 million years ago on Earth. We'll also see that these biomes are inhabited by a variety of organisms. These organisms have evolved to occupy these certain niches, these certain biomes, and each one has a range of tolerance that it can live in. It needs a certain amount of water, certain temperatures, certain breeding habitats, and these things are all controlled by the evolution of these biomes over the past millions or even billions of years. All living organisms have requirements in light, in water, and salinity, and nitrogen, and shelter, and all of these things can be met by the biomes in which they live. And so this graph here really shows that you have a population of butterflies here, and it has this optimum range where it exists in this particular biome, and as you move away from this optimum range, you're not having as large a population because they have not evolved to live in these other types of climates. And all organisms have these tolerance levels at which they cannot survive anymore. And these are going to be controlled by a number of different limiting factors that have controlled where these organisms are found on Earth. And these things have evolved over millions and millions of years to live in these particular types of biomes. This video describes a very unique adaptation of this wood frog in Ohio. This frog is able to tolerate conditions that are very, very cold, some conditions that we have here in Ohio and in other parts of the Midwest. This organism actually can freeze itself in the wintertime and then basically come back to life in the springtime. So this is a very unique organism, and this video really shows how it works. It's a very cool organism that has evolved to live in this particular biome. These are some examples of the terrestrial biomes that we're going to study today. The tundra biome that you might find in Alaska, tropical rainforest that you might find in the Amazon, boreal forest that you might find in northern Canada, savanna that you would find in southern Africa, desert biomes that you would find in the Sahara or in the southwest of the United States, and Mediterranean biomes that, as the name suggests, you would find around the Mediterranean Sea. And we have to remember that there are a number of specific factors that control the biomes. The angle of the sun as it strikes the earth, ocean currents, the relative placement of the land masses next to large bodies of water, semi-permanent low and high pressure systems, air masses, winds, storms, jet streams, altitudes, and mountains. So all of these things are going to affect the different biomes all over the globe. So the first biome we'll look at is the Arctic tundra. As this map shows, the Arctic tundra are found only in the northern hemisphere, the far northern latitudes of the northern hemisphere. The only exception is the alpine tundras that occur at higher elevations of mountains, and these can occur in the southern hemisphere. An example of an alpine tundra in the northern hemisphere would be Logan's Pass in Glacier National Park in Montana. So that would be located about right out here. This is one of the national parks that I really have encouraged all of you to visit. So when we describe biomes, we're going to look a lot of times at these climate diagrams. And the climate diagram is shown right here. Average monthly precipitation is given here in blue, in centimeters, and average monthly temperatures is given right here as this line plot in degrees Celsius. Down here are the different months: January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, and December. And so you can see for January, they're getting about 1 centimeter of precipitation, and the temperature is about minus 28 degrees Celsius. Tundra biomes, as you can see, receive very little precipitation, usually between 10 and 25 centimeters annually. The soil of these environments are very poor. They formed when the glaciers retreated about 17,000 years ago, and they also contain permafrost. Permafrost itself is permanently frozen ground, and so some of this ground stays frozen all year long, and as a result it really interferes with the drainage of surface liquids, and so in the summertime this soil becomes very waterlogged and it's very soggy. You can see from the picture there you have a flat topography. From the climate diagram, the temperatures can get very cold in the winter months. Major organisms that you would find are shrubs and small conifers. You're not going to find large deciduous trees here. Most of these are going to be lichens, mosses, and grasses. As far as the mammals, you're going to find hares, muskox, caribou, like you see here in this picture, and a large number of migratory birds who migrate to these areas in the summertime because there's abundant insects for them to feed upon. And this video here shows about the summer migratory birds and how they depend upon these Arctic tundra biomes for their breeding habitats and for raising their young in the summertime. The next biome is a boreal forest biome, and these occur just south of the tundra type biomes. These again are very cold biomes. There are no boreal forests in the southern hemisphere. The winters can be very severe in these locations. The precipitation varies, but generally you're having less than 50 centimeters of precipitation per year. There's numerous ponds and lakes in these biomes, and this was caused by the grinding of the ice sheets during the ice ages and the deposition of the water as it retreated. You'll see here very small conifers or evergreen trees live in these biomes. You're not going to find the deciduous trees are not going to be located in here. The conifers are adapted to these biomes because the needles have minimal surface area that prevents water loss, and they also have a waxy surface layer that prevents water loss by evapotranspiration. They're also evergreens, so they're quick to resume photosynthesis when the summer comes. The summer is a very short time here, so they have to be ready to do photosynthesis to make those sugars so that they can grow, they can reproduce, and so that's why they are evergreen trees. Again, you'll find similar animals here: caribou, wolves, bear, moose, lynx. You'll also find the migratory birds in the summertime. They use these areas for breeding, for raising their young. There are very few amphibians and reptiles that you'd find here, and again, that's because the temperatures can become very, very cold. The soils themselves are very acidic. They're very poor soil, and again, you're going to have permafrost that's going to limit the infiltration of a lot of the water, the surface water. Temperate rainforests are found all over the globe. A very good example is the Pacific Northwest near Seattle, Washington. This is a temperate rainforest. The precipitation is very high. You're really going to get between 200 and 400 centimeters of precipitation annually. Again, a good example of this is the Pacific Northwest in the United States. This has a close proximity to the Pacific Ocean, and so the temperature itself is very mild. You can see here from the temperature curve that even in the winter times it doesn't get very cold in these areas. The summers themselves are very cool as well. It gets up to, in this particular biome, about 15 to 18 degrees Celsius. As a result of this, you have cool temperatures all year long, so the soil itself contains a lot of organic material, and that's because the microorganisms in the soil are unable to break this down. You can see all this organic material here because the temperatures just aren't high enough for them to be metabolically active in breaking those down. So you have a lot of organic material coating the trees, coating the floors of these biomes. The dominant plants that you're going to have are large evergreens such as hemlocks and firs, but you're also going to have a lot of mosses and ferns. You're going to have a lot of deer, amphibians, birds and reptiles living in these areas as well. So here we see the temperate rainforest biome that extends clear up here into British Columbia from Seattle, Washington, and even down into parts of California. This video describes what these temperate rainforests are like and how humans have impacted them over time. So in Columbus, Ohio, we're sitting in a temperate deciduous forest right now. The dominating tree species outside are deciduous trees, meaning they lose their leaves in the fall and the winter, and these leaves grow back in the springtime. Oak and maple are the dominant trees, hardwood trees. The topsoil itself is very rich with organic material, so that makes Ohio and many of the other Midwestern states very good agricultural states. You have a dense canopy of trees here, overlaying saplings and shrubs, sizable amount of precipitation, somewhere between 75 and 125 centimeters per year. The temperatures themselves can vary throughout the year. It can get pretty cold in the wintertime and fairly warm in the summertime. And as you can see here, this maybe would be like Ohio in the early 1800s, where you have a homestead, and this farmer cleared this area right here for agriculture, and this would have been the natural ecosystem before he inhabited this area. This video talks about sustainable logging. It's a practice that's used today to try and preserve the timber for future generations and try to preserve these for the health of the ecosystem itself. And we're all familiar with the tropical rainforest biome. For example, what you might find in Brazil in the Amazon rainforest. These are biomes that have a lot of biodiversity, and it's very rich with a number of different species. You have high amounts of precipitation throughout the year. Annual precipitations can be between 200 and 400 centimeters per year. A lot of biodiversity, very warm weather. You can see most year long it's above 25 degrees Celsius, so you're going to have photosynthesis occur all year long. The soils themselves are going to have very little organic material, and that's due to the high temperatures. The microorganisms, the fungi that are in those soils are very active because the temperatures are very high. And so as a result, anything that falls to the floor is gobbled up by any of the organisms that may be living down there. A fully developed rainforest also has 3 plant layers. They have this emergent layer that's at the top, and these trees are about 50 meters tall. Below that, you have a canopy layer of trees that are about 30 to 40 meters high, and then below that you have the forest understory. This area down here is only receiving about 2 to 3% of the sunlight that reaches the upper levels of the canopy and the emergent zone. When we don't count bacteria, this canopy layer actually contains about 90% of all the organisms that live in the tropical rainforest ecosystem. And you're going to find a wide variety of organisms here. Mammals, reptiles, insects, amphibians, fish, elephants, you name it, you're probably going to find them in this type of biome. And this shows the distribution of the tropical rainforests, and you'll notice that they're all located in and around near the equator, and that's because you have this convergence of warm, moist air. As a result, you're having thunderstorms, a lot of precipitation falling in these areas, and so you have these tropical rainforests developing in these particular areas in and around the equator. This is a nice video from the New York Times. It talks about the rainforests of Paraguay and how they're fading due to the encroachment of human activities. So I invite you to learn a little bit more about this tropical rainforest biome in Papua New Guinea, not only because it's a very unique ecosystem, but also because of its unique history. Kuru, or laughing sickness, was discovered here in the 1950s by Professor Apers. And this is a prion disease similar to mad cow's disease that was transmitted by cannibalism practiced by these native New Guineans that lived in this ecosystem. So I invite you to investigate this a little bit further, because it is a very interesting ecosystem where these humans have occupied it for a great many number of years. As the name suggests, Mediterranean biomes are found around the Mediterranean Sea, but they're also found in the Santa Monica Mountains in the United States, central Chile, Australia, and other parts of southwestern Australia. These biomes are characterized with soil that has little organic material. They get very little precipitation, less than 50 centimeters per year. The summers are hot and dry. Again, the soils are thin, not fertile. There's not a lot of organic material. And the organisms that live here are reptiles or small mammals. Many of them are nocturnal, so they have evolved to operate and come out when the sun is gone, so it's not so hot. Temperate grassland biomes, good example of this. If you watch the movie by Kevin Costner, Dances with Wolves, a lot of it was filmed in a grassland biome in South Dakota. They get a sizable amount of precipitation, usually 25 to 75 centimeters per year. The soil itself has a lot of organic material. That's because many of these grasses are annual grasses. They die off every year. That material gets taken down in the soil and it's used for the next year. You can have tall prairie grasses in Illinois, Iowa, and Kansas, and you can also have these shorter prairie grasses that you would have in other parts of the West as well. Periodic wildfires help maintain the grasses as the dominant vegetation, so that's why you don't have a lot of trees in this area. You have medium to large size animals, you have reptiles, you have snakes as well, but this biome really supports large herds of grazing animals. So in the early 1700s, before the settlements of the earliest Europeans into the West, you had a lot of bison grazing in this area because this was a very nice biome for them. And you can see from this map that grassland biomes are widely distributed all over the globe. A savanna biome would be a biome that we would see in Africa, and these are tropical grasslands in which you have widely scattered trees. You have very low precipitation, or you have intense seasonal rainfall with prolonged periods of drought. And that's what you have here. You have rainfall here in the winter months and this prolonged dry season here in the spring and summer months. Precipitation can range between 80 to 150 centimeters a year. The soil itself does not have a lot of nutrients, and again, this is because it's heavily leached during the rainy season, and also any microorganisms that might be living in there are going to consume any organic material very quickly because the temperatures are warm all year long, so their metabolic activities are going to be very high throughout the year. This, again, is a good example of what you'd find in the African savanna. The plants have well-adapted root systems that allow them to survive the droughts and periodic fires. You have large herds of animals, zebra, wildebeest that follow the rain. You have large predators, lions and hyenas that are going to follow the prey. Again, temperatures are going to be warm throughout the year and fairly constant throughout the year. This is a nice video that shows the different communities in Botswana interacting with one another in a savanna type of biome. And finally, we have the desert biomes, as the name suggests. Very little rainfall throughout the year. In fact, you're going to probably get in most of them less than 25 centimeters throughout the year. The temperatures can vary. It can be hot throughout the year, or it can be warm in the summer months and cool in the winter months. Deserts are found in both temperate and tropical regions. There's low water vapor content in the atmosphere, and these are also typically characterized by high pressure systems or rain shadow effects. So you would have these in the Tibetan Plateau, on the east side of the Himalayan mountains, where you'd have very dry air, and you're going to get these desert biomes to develop. The plants themselves are sparse and far between. They are adapted to conserve water by having no leaves or having leaves that can close up, have a waxy layer, and prevent evapotranspiration. The mammals themselves that are there are going to be largely small, nocturnal, that live underground in caves during the day and then come out at night. The temperatures themselves during the day can vary widely, and at the night it can become very cold, and the day it can become very warm. And that's because there's not a lot of water vapor in the air, and so you're not getting that buffering effect of the water in the atmosphere. These desert biomes are found all over the globe. A very good example is shown right here. You have a high pressure system in northern Africa, and as a result you get a very dry air and a desert biome covering most of northern Africa. This video really describes that desert, the Sahara Desert in northern Chad, and describes how the humans have adapted to this and how some of the organisms have adapted to this desert biome. When we talk about biomes, we also have to consider human beings. We live in urban biomes, and you can see here from this map that we have populations that are distributed not uniformly, not randomly, but in specific clump patterns all over the globe. And you can see specifically here in the United States, the majority of the population is located in the East Coast, but you also can notice India has a large population, so does the eastern parts of China. Europe has large populations, this urban biome as well. You'll also notice that here in the Sahara Desert, there are no humans living. That population is to the north and to the south. So just as organisms have evolved to live in certain biomes, we as humans have evolved to live in certain biomes as well. We do not prefer, for example, tundra biomes up in here or tundra and boreal forest biomes. You don't see a whole lot of organisms, human organisms, living in these areas. In desert biomes or in rainforest biomes, you do not see a lot of human activity. Most of us are clumped together in these particular biomes that support our everyday needs. And these needs generally are fertile soil for agriculture and fresh water for drinking. And this figure really summarizes all the major biomes on Earth. You can see here on the y-axis you have temperatures, cold temperatures, warm temperatures, and precipitation down here on the x-axis, dry and wet. And you can see that deserts would be located in this particular area, tropical rainforest would be located in this particular area, and this graph is a really good description of how the different biomes are divided based on their annual temperature and based on their annual precipitation patterns all over Earth.